Hi, I'm Rick Stengel. I'm the editor of Time magazine, and I am here with Bill Gates to talk about his story for Time this week. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you.
It's all about your big idea of creative capitalism. I'd love you to tell our readers what the heck creative capitalism is.
Well, capitalism's done a great job for the people who are well off. But if we look at the disparity between the poorest and the rest of the world, that gap is growing. And so the question is, can we take some of the carrying and innovation power, the resources of corporations, and get them to focus more of that on the needs of the poorest? And it's very timely because whether it's breakthroughs in medicine or using cell phones in creative ways, new forms of banking, food with better nutrition, there are clearly some things that these large companies with their great resources and their innovation power, if we get them to apply that more significantly for those with the most need, that we can reduce impoverishment far faster than simply relying on government alone.
Mm-hmm. You write about how this idea mixes two primal human impulses, the self-interest that we all have and the desire and willingness to do good and help others. How does creative capitalism mesh those two impulses?
Well, there's a bit of a market failure in that if you're very poor, your voice in the marketplace is very small. And so you'll have a disease like a malaria or other diseases of poor countries where it's not going to make a pure profit-driven prioritization in the same way that something like reducing baldness might, because those consumers speak with a loud economic voice. So how do we alleviate that? Part of it is the view that young people really do want to be involved with things that are helping the poorest, that they want to associate themselves with a company who's taking some of their innovation power and prioritizing it for these needs. Now, there are people like C.K. Prahalad who pointed out that as you look at the needs of these consumers, you often come up with cost breakthroughs and you find a higher volume market. And so you can sometimes go down this path with it being purely sort of philanthropic, brand-oriented, just fulfilling the broad mission, and see that it actually does fit in with the more traditional way of prioritizing things. And that's fine with me. I think you've got to explore the space, and you'll find things that are economic and things that are more reputationally driven.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the latter. Let's talk about recognition, because you write eloquently about how young people today are looking to work for companies that they feel are socially responsible. How does that help them? How does that even help their bottom line?
Well, I do see this big change that young people in their life's work want to feel like their company really is a positive agent for change. If their company has a certain type of science, that it's not just for the richest. And I think that is a very positive instinct that we can draw on, because companies compete to hire those people, to have them enthusiastic about the work they do. And so by taking each industry and having literally rankings that show which companies are being the most innovative and looking out for the needs of the poorest, then we'll raise the level of activity as people look at how they're being viewed.
You're one of the great capitalists of the 20th century. And in the piece, you talk a little bit about the ways that capitalism has failed at the bottom of the market, or in the third world, in the developing world. How has capitalism not worked in terms of how people are feeling right now?
Well, capitalism over long periods of time has worked better than anyone expected. And it's easy to lose sight of the fact of that because we look at individual companies that fail, and yet the overall total employment over the decades has gone up and up and up. So I don't think there's many people who'd want to set the clock back and say, okay, I don't want the breakthrough medicines. I don't want the empowerment of the internet or the cell phone or the great things that we have. At all times, you're always worried about imbalances, but that's partly why the system works so well. If there's a shortage of clean energy, then the high few people who understand those areas are drawn in.
Right.
And energy is a great example where I'd say there's 20 times as many brilliant people thinking about energy breakthroughs today as there were 10 years ago. So I love the energy space. It's a great example of capitalism seeing a need, drawing in big companies, small companies, funding research at universities. This is happening particularly in the US, but it's more global today than it would have been in the past.